We circulate around the room a draft committee recommendation packet, and then 2 emails, I think, one from Angie, and the other from Brooke. So maybe sequentially, we could kind of work through the couple-page outline. And,
for what it's worth, I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah. Before you start,
Oh yeah.
just let me just explain. The draft committee recommendation packet is something that I pulled together last night around midnight, and all it is, it just reflects organizationally the topics that were identified in the resolution setting up this group, and then I've just put bullet points in for materials I've distributed previously. So I don't think I've really elaborated on anything that I haven't circulated before, probably in the initial week or two of the formation of the committee. I have supplemented the back end just to make sure we've covered all of the bullet points in the resolution, information about funding, assets, projects, and I speculate in terms of what those things could be or how they might be structured. So this is just meant as a working draft. It's not a reflection of the committee's efforts to date. It's just my sort of effort to try and organize this in the form of a resolution, which Shana suggested last week might be a good way to sort of take the next steps in this discussion. So I just wanted to clarify that topic.
Yes. At the last meeting, I had sort of taken it as a bit of homework. We talked about limiting the scope. That had been something that had been important to me. I had drafted up a paragraph of language for the digestion of the group. I think I only had 10 copies, so I probably don't have enough copies.
And Tom, I figured you would speak to it, which is why I didn't print it out.
No problem. Yeah. And it can be addressed in accordance with this outline. I just wanted to make sure I got that out.
And then also Leonardo McClarity wrote in and said that his feedback was that he didn't think we should create another entity.
Okay.
And then Bea Lewis also wrote in and said, quickly read through, looks like all is on the right track.
Well, there are 2 ways to jump off the cliff here. One would be to look at Tom's language and start there. The second would be to just maybe start on the list I have. Tom's piece could come up in the second, third bullet of what I've organized clearly.
Yeah, I think it'd probably be better there.
Yeah.
I would not recommend starting off.
All right, because the mission statement is probably a good place, Tom, where I could see this language fitting in or some version of it. So I just thought initially geographic boundaries of the CDC, CDO, and I heard loud and clear last week we shouldn't be too definitive about what type of organization this could be, so I'm just keeping that sort of broader categorization of that. That's the Community Development Corporation, Community Development Organization approach for the time being, and maybe we make decisions about that as we get into this tonight or next week, but contextually I just thought that'd be a fair way to play it for the time being. So the suggestion I think Gary had made months past, I hate to say months, but certainly weeks ago, use the Ellicott City Watershed Master Plan boundaries as the defining element. And I do think we did have some folks weigh in on that with respect to the Tiber Hudson watershed in one case and all of Ellicott City in the other, which I'm not sure, I think of Brooks' comment, that might be too broad, just as a thought. I'd like to open this up just for discussion in terms of what people think the geographic area should be. And I do make a second point here that it might raise cross-jurisdictional issues with Baltimore County because there's been no representation in this discussion, this process about anybody from Baltimore County participating, although it's pretty easy to look across the river and see assets over there that are affected by flood. The Flower Mill comes to mind immediately, the parking lot on the other side of the street, the building, historic building that sits on the edge of close to Westchester Avenue, I believe, and Frederick Road are all buildings that typically are affected, but I know that the Highs gets affected too. So I don't know how far up the street we want to run in Baltimore County, but I'd like to just open it up with a discussion about the boundaries and see where we go with that.
Well, I think the first point that came to my mind is just this, that the charge is to determine whether or not it's appropriate to create an Ellicott City, CDC. So if we're going to expand the boundaries of the CDO and CDC beyond the general Ellicott City area, we're not operating within that scope. Not to say that it can't be expanded, but I think when you're going across jurisdictions, you do create a whole new set of challenges outside of what we've been discussing the past 6 weeks or so.
It might just be something that the entity aspires to address on its own in time,
Yeah.
rather than we address it directly today, but I put them on the table. Secondly, the Ellicott City, to say all about Ellicott City, I don't really think that's consistent with the scope of the resolution that was defined by the county executive. I do think there was some desire to limit this more to areas that were afflicted by the floods and the challenges of the flood. I don't know if anybody else shares that perspective, but Tim?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot too, and obviously the focus has to be on Old Ellicott City because that's where the biggest problem has been. But that said, I do wonder whether if we limited that narrowly, just for example, if the community development organization or corporation has either title or is a lessee for the properties on Main Street, and there's another catastrophic event, and if it's dependent on leasing out those properties for its revenue, does it undermine its self-sustainability by not having an opportunity to spread its risk? Or, it's just a question that I've got, because if it's all right there on Main Street and there's a problem right on Main Street, then what happens to the revenue for the organization once it becomes on its own 2 feet?
So, reading what Brooke said and what Angie had said about the limiting of it, I think whatever organization this has, clearly there will be future ramifications associated with Baltimore County, which, again, if the right people are put in place in that organization, they'll be able to be the ones who reach across the boundary and make that partnership happen at that time. So I don't necessarily think that needs to be included in the original one. Likewise, limiting it to the historic district, things that are happening outside of the historic boundaries, I think T1 in the plan is outside the historic district boundaries. So clearly, any property that needs to be bought, parcel, whatever, that need to be able to make those negotiations and or affect long-term change is going to fall outside of that boundary. And so I think it really should be inclusive of the watershed. It just seems to make sense that anything that's happening in that watershed is going to have a direct effect on Main Street.
Is there any objection to the watershed being the boundary for the time being? Does anyone object to that?
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say, is that the watershed actually encompasses all of the entrances into the historic district. So using that as an umbrella, it really, you're able to manage and take care of all of those main entrances.
So it sounds like there's consensus on the watershed boundary, and maybe some reflection needs to be paid by the organization that might be formed to the notion of outreach, some maybe board membership, some way to engage with Baltimore County, so that there could be some engagement across the river. But I do feel a little remiss in not weighing Brooke's thoughts here relative to the broader Ellicott City area. I just think it might be too much and too diffuse. And I think
and the tactics of dealing with repairing sprawl on 40 versus dealing with the revitalization of a historic community are so different. And there, I think, if this succeeds, perhaps it can be inspiration for other groups to stand up throughout the county for other areas, because there's other areas that need help. This is not the only place that needs it, and there's large stretches of sprawl along 40 that are going to be an issue in 30 to 40 years. They're an issue now, and they're going to be a real drag in the county in the future. But that's a different job, I think.
And I think that one lesson that can be learned from the Ellicott City Partnership is that in times of disaster and need, constituencies can end up pulling the organization in different directions. So taking on the watershed, we should be aware in making the recommendations for the CDC that everyone in that catchment area is going to purport itself to be a constituent with the right to make demands of the CDC. Now, obviously, the CDC has its own mission to fulfill, but there is no one outside of the Ellicott City Partnership catchment area, historic district. It was easy for the ECP to say, I'm sorry, but you're outside of our mission area, we can't do anything. The CDC is going to have that same issue ultimately.
Right. Regardless of where the boundary is, because there'd be somebody in Gleno that would say, gee, what about us? Or some other part of the county, so.
And I think to the Baltimore County piece, I mean, I understand curtailing it to Ellicott City. If you look at Ellicott City historically, there was never really any distinction between Baltimore County and Howard County in terms of what was Ellicott City. So I think that there's some value to remembering that. But also I think that part of the recommendation could be that we encourage this new organization to look at opportunities to partner with Baltimore County down the road. And so that is kind of in its founding documents, that it's something that it should at least be looking at. But I do think it's probably a little cart before the horse for us to say it's going to involve Baltimore County without talking to the county executive there or anyone.
Does anybody know, is Owella incorporated in of itself?
Baltimore County has no incorporated
City?
municipalities.
Okay, so yes.
No, I would just add explore
Okay.
the opportunities. That's,
Yeah.
you can, it'd be presumptive. You can't.
Unless
And
we
it
just
might be
want-
damaging to whatever you're trying to do in
Unless we
Ellicott
just want to
City.
take it. Plant power.
CDC is going to have all this money, they're going to start buying properties over there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the acronym CDC, Communist Development Corporation. I don't think that's what we're hearing.
We've invaded.
So I just added this note that said, once formed, the organization should seek to engage with Baltimore County, I'll say, in order to explore opportunities.
Great.
Right. That's good.
And then, second bullet, instead of getting into the mission statement, I was sort of hung up on this last night. I thought it was presumptuous to come up with a mission statement for me or really any single person to do it. We really need to do it together. So instead, I really focused on activities that the organization should address. And I did not proof this, so if there are typos in here or clearly things I've left out, different ways to word things, but I just, a brain dump, just put things out on a piece of paper that I thought the organization should have as part of their scope of work, which was again language from the resolution. And I don't need to read all of these, and I'd love to just discuss them, but I just wanted to start the discussion tonight with the scope. Champion the needs, implement the vision for the district. Collaborate with all county departments, state agencies. I really wanted to make this inclusive, existing business organizations and community groups. And I get into more detail down below about who those entities are once we get beyond the scope of work piece of this. Coordinate the strategic revitalization of the watershed area, implement stormwater management recommendations, the ECWMP, which is the Ellicott City Watershed Master Plan. And I'm a little hung up on the implementation piece because I'm not really sure that's the role the organization should play, because that might be more of a county function.
Yeah.
Right, so again,
Yeah.
I'm throwing things in here,
Yeah.
let's just wordsmith it.
I would almost suggest maybe it's support the stormwater management recommendations.
Good. Okay.
So
So,
somehow put,
Or
they have the ability to preview all activities that relate to the watershed. Just part of the problem is nobody talks to each other
okay.
unless you're in the mix.
Absolutely, and again, because of that, if you think about how things happen, if the CDO or whatever it is ends up saying, we've got a plan for this parcel that's down here, but something that's happening for the effective engineering is going to impact that, you're going to have coordination to go.
So,
But you can't require the county to,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
the
mission.
county has its own, I mean, as you know, through land use, the county has its own rules and ordinances in terms of who gets review and when that happens and when public information is disseminated.
And this wasn't a case of saying that they have control over it, it's just a case of being able to be notified of what's happening because it's clearly going to affect the long-term.
But it should be notified that just like everybody else.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's
mean,
incumbent upon the group to be.
Government can't be preferential.
I think it's incumbent upon the group to be an active and maybe aggressive participant in making sure it gets that information. I mean, it's easy to miss things or to not be paying attention and miss things.
So is a better word advocate instead of support
Right.
with respect to the stormwater management recommendations in the master plan? Puts them in a just a
Well, it's
more
almost,
proactive role.
I mean, I know we're really into the wordsmithing weeds here, but I almost wonder if it should be coordinate the strategic revitalization of the watershed, which complements the stormwater management recommendations in the east. Because really their focus, from what I understand and from our discussions, is on revitalization, and it's not going to be implementation of the stormwater management, but you want to make sure that that revitalization does complement it. I feel like advocacy is a separate bullet unto itself. And you want to make sure that that revitalization, sort of to what Charles was saying, where it's like you want to make sure that it complements and it makes sense in light of what is happening with the mitigation and the engineering.
And advocacy, as we all know, is a very sticky wicket in and of itself, because especially when you were dealing with elected leadership, coming in and advocating for a certain proposal, certain plan, the line between that and advocating for a particular politician is very thin. So I would certainly recommend, to the extent possible, we narrow the focus and make it be about what the CDC can functionally do for the district. I can assure you advocacy will probably be carried out by many different organizations.
So I'm making changes as it sounds like people come to resolution, so just keep an eye on the
Wanna do
screen.
track changes?
Oh, I guess I could do track changes.
Let's
I was just
put-
gonna say if you see me doing it.
Let's put the advocacy button aside for a second. So we start off with the 3%. The packet.
I'm doing it.
I think we can just start at the top of the list and champion the needs and implement the vision for the district. Any changes there?
I guess I still have a hitch on the word implement there as well. So I'm not sure what that means. It seems to imply, that it's the one that actually goes out and does it, as opposed to orchestrating it somehow.
Well, they're going to do the economic revitalization piece of it. There's no one else to do that. So that's what I meant by it.
I don't know that I would agree with that. EDA has certainly a heavy hand, and the partnership, along with EDA, so I just think that sort of broad brush is a duplication of mission. I certainly think with respect to property, absolutely, I don't see anyone doing that right now. But I would just urge us to consider that there is an ecosystem, and I'm not trying to defend the turf of ECP or EDA or tourism or anybody else, but we do all have a mission, and we work together to execute that mission. And I just think we may be using words I think we just have to be precise with the words.
Would coordinate work better there?
Jim?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
because there's also that phrase, the vision, and I'm not quite sure what we're talking about when we say
Yeah.
the vision. And I'm wondering if it might make sense to say something like champion the needs, I had a thought just escaped me a second ago. Champion the needs and promote the revitalization of the district, or something like that. Tying it back to the notion of revitalizing as opposed to the vision, because it's not quite clear to me. Has
Can
the
you
vision
tie
been
it-
articulated?
Is it more lead the revitalization rather than promote? Because the promoting role is a role that ECP, among other organizations, play a role in now. But this would be an entity that would lead. It would. In coordination with, and with board representation from the other entities that are adjacent to it, around it. It's not meant to take their place. It's kind of a roll-up.
Why is there, because I'll say this, I'm pretty much there from the fourth bullet down. I guess I needed more instruction on why this organization is the one that would lead as opposed to a constituent organization such as the ECP.
Because you need expertise in redevelopment economic, structural, those skill sets.
But, I mean, I guess certainly that depends on the issue that they are leading on. I mean, there are going to be community aspects that ECP would lead on. Economic development, the EDA is very much involved in Main Street, and they're cutting ribbons, I mean, yesterday, the day before yesterday, all the time. Where I struggle is I see a great functional component for what the CDC can bring to Main Street that isn't there anymore. These first 4 bullets, I think, is kind of like the new guy in town saying, I'm your leader now, just follow me. And so I think that, you know, sort of what Angie pointed out in her email is that, you know, and she did this in the context of purchasing possession of the buildings. I think we always need to be conscious of the fact that we can undermine anything the CDC tries to accomplish if we don't know our role and sort of know what this entity is new. This entity is doing something that will undoubtedly, just by its nature, be controversial. And it's going to need years to build up credibility in order to do any leading.
If you change the word vision to the Ellicott City Watershed Master Plan, does that help?
I mean, would the CDC lead the implementation of the master plan?
Yes.
I mean, the master plan, so we sort of hit on this before. The master plan is implemented by the Department of Planning and Zoning. They compare proposals for development against the master plan, and it informs policy and land development decisions therefrom. There are many people, I mean, every citizen has an individual right to advocate for the master plan, and I don't think that this organization will have any authority above and beyond any other citizen or organization in saying this is in accordance with the master plan or it is not in accordance with the master plan.
And I think it should.
But you
But
can't
it doesn't have the
just
legal authority to
deem
do
someone with authority. You don't just knight them and say now you have authority to.
So
implement the master
I see
plan.
where you're going with this, and I'm not saying this just because it's the role that we play, but I do see similarities to the role of a statewide preservation group, to all of the local preservation groups, the Main Street organizations. We were never, even though we're one of the oldest, or if not the oldest, we don't have any actual authority, nor do we consider ourselves like in charge of preservation in the state. We have to work in a collaborative process with groups every day, and we have to build trust, and we rarely if ever come into a place without any constituent backing us and say you should do it this way, and it's because we think that. So I think it's just a different take on leadership. Whereas just putting it in writing is one way. If the CDC wants to lead, then it can lead by example, and it can try and pull people together, and just like ECP can do the same thing and EDA can do the same thing. I do think by putting it in writing, it could turn people off. We do need to be careful of that. Like,
especially because many of the people that served on the master plan
Right.
committee up to this point in time don't even support what we're doing here. So
That came out of the recommendations.
yes, certainly, but maybe not what this. We're then putting, you know, details, muscle, and skin on the bones that they said, hey, this would be a good idea to have. I don't think that. I think Nick and I are on the same page. If it's going to develop credibility on a certain issue, it should utilize that credibility pursuant to the mission of the organization. I have a hard time, and I'm just not going to be able to offer my consensus on any advocacy or overt, we are the leaders now, written statement as far as what the CDC is supposed to do. I think that, again, from the 4th bullet down, I'm there. You know, I don't really have much to quibble with there. I think that it's the asserting ourselves in the leadership role, or ourselves. I'm not going to be on the board, but Asserting the CDC's leadership role is something I have a problem with. That's something that comes organically.
So if in fact the composition of the board of directors is composed of representatives from every organization we can think of, at the community level, at the business level, at the community service level, county level, so there would be a representative from the Economic Development Authority that's on the board. It seemed to me we're buying into the culture that exists today, and it addresses, in my mind at least, comforts me that there is engagement among all parties, so that this becomes something that is a vehicle through which all of these organizations have a role, a say. They hire the executive director. They engage in hiring staff. They work cooperatively currently. They will continue to work cooperatively, hopefully, with this entity. So leadership, but by committee. The committee of all the
That reminds
parties.
me of the U.S. Senate, because you're going to have outside constituencies who their organization, wherever they come from, may not be the full area of the district, but yet in their representative role, they will have an outside voice. So I don't think we need to presume that the credibility will be baked into the cake so long as we have
I think
a
it's better.
representative.
It becomes more credible in my mind. That in fact, these are the people who play roles in this Ellicott City story today, so that we're not usurping any organization. Those organizations still exist, but it's a way to be inclusive, in my mind. I don't know that
And there are
But having
things-
them serve on a board is certainly, absolutely a step in the right direction. But that is what is it, necessary but not sufficient condition for them to buy in and not feel threatened by what, in some of the first bullets, seem like perhaps a fully governmental role or a different role than I think was ever envisioned. So they might be on the board, but that doesn't mean that they're going to support it.
Well, if you get on a board, you should be,
I mean, to Mike's point, if you're on the board, I'll use you as an example, if you're on that board and you are part of the group in charge of hiring the executive director and coming up with the mission statement for that organization, wouldn't you have buy-in?
So I will posit that this is a different scenario in which you're saying there is an existing ecosystem. We are going to add to that ecosystem in a way that may not be appreciated by all parties, right? At least at the outset. And so people may choose to be on the board because it's better to be in the tent looking out than the other way. And that doesn't necessarily guarantee their buy-in. That may, in fact, they may seek the survival of their organizations. They may seek to be intel sources. And I'm not trying to be conspiracy theorist. I just think that there has to be a compelling story. I would think that to start with a narrowly defined mission that nobody else is executing, that is really important to the long-term viability of Ellicott City, is a great place to start. And if there are other things, other needs that evolve, that are clear, that no other organization can meet, should meet, will meet, has the authority to meet, then that can be a, over time, expansion of scope or whatever, but in an appropriate, dedicated, and purposeful kind of way. I would really rather start small. I think starting big is a much harder,
I don't think we're
tougher road
trying to
to hoe.
start big. Tell me what your mission is, what you envision the mission of the CDC is.
Well, I'm just with Tom. I think some of these first couple bullets sort of suggest, like, as I read them, almost like implement the master plan, implement the stormwater management recommendations. That seems well beyond manage some property that
Again,
the county is.
I'll take responsibility for the way it's worded, and again, it was done quickly, just to get the discussion tonight, to start us thinking about this. But I think we've identified in the last couple of months that what we have doesn't work, it doesn't address the problem, and we need something more, and we need a vehicle through which change can happen. And I think if we just get too limiting in terms of what we think this organization should be, or too big, it will fail. It won't work.
So
I'm trying
I'm
to
going to
start-
make myself incredibly unpopular and say that I do not feel that I understand the problem this organization seeks to solve outside of the management and redevelopment of certain properties, which is not necessarily limited to those at the bottom of the hill or those at the west end. Of course, as has been discussed, maybe courthouse, maybe others, that are certainly part of this ecosystem that the county may choose to grant or give or sell for $1 or lease in a 100-year lease or whatever to an organization who might be better positioned to then manage its redevelopment in a more purposeful way on behalf of the citizenry of the county. But outside of that, I don't know the gap that we are seeking to fill.
And if I can just build off of that, I see the taking ownership and redevelopment of the properties that the county may acquire as a huge task that is worth all of the aspirational goals that we've been discussing. That if a CDC were successful in revitalizing and redevelopment those properties in a way that worked within the Main Street culture and community and provided that benefit, essentially putting investment where the market will not otherwise step, I think that that would be a huge, bold vision for this organization. And I would say in terms of what's not working, things were working in April of 2018. It was the second flood that really set things, upside down. So, I mean, I think that this organization has a very broad and important purpose. I just am very resistant to, and my little paragraph states that, doing anything that is budging into the territory of organizations that I think have been very strong in advocating and leadership and coalition building amongst the constituencies we're looking to serve.
Do you want to quickly review, this is from the unmet, this is the analysis that we did a couple weeks ago. I don't think, Tom, unfortunately, I think you and Matt had conflicts that night and you
I
weren't
watched
here.
it and I've read it.
So these were the things that, just in terms of answering Matt's question, these are the things that the committee members felt like were not currently happening. And so maybe just looking at this list might just get that discussion going a little.
I don't know if it's going to take it in that good direction.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Go ahead.
no,
you go.
you were talking.
No, you go ahead. You go first, Charles.
No.
Oh.
I want to go.
Yeah, I have a list here, and there's a lot of action words.
that's up there, right?
Yeah, it's the same thing right here. And so so as far as unmet needs, I mean, we have a lot of compelling words here. So I guess my question is about process right now. Are we, and I apologize for being a few minutes late, but is there a draft process? Like, I guess and I apologize if you start. So we're going to start wordsmithing every single, do you want to do that? Go through every single word and do it? Or could we have maybe like 2 or 3 suggestions? One that has a word like lead in it, or one that has something more general like consensus. You said something like engaging consent. You just said something. Coalition building. Thank you. I didn't write it all down. Something that has these like alternatives, because I don't know if we're necessarily. Yeah, I'm not interested in going back to this conversation. We've already had this conversation.
Yeah.
So if we're in the place of, so I guess I'm suggesting a process where maybe we have, instead of coming together as one mission, maybe we have 1 or 2, because it sounds like maybe we get in a situation where we're splitting hairs, right? So if we had you seem comfortable with the word, like the CDC is leadership and revitalizing OEC. Like that's what I hear from you. And then I see you hear more like consent, what was the word again?
What?
Coalition building.
More fourth bullet down.
Yeah, like coalition, but again, it's all back to revitalizing OEC, coalition building. So maybe it's the leaders of coalition building at OEC. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I like a process where you kind of put things up on a board and you kind of piece it together. I don't know.
We're doing that with the screen. So
Okay.
what we have on the screen, this is the document that reflects this write-up, and we're going bullet by bullet through that write-up, and we're talking about each item. I've heard from number 4, the 4th bullet down, consensus.
At least this annoying guy.
You know,
Without the annoying guy thing. But it's fair. I mean, we all want to put our opinions out.
Yeah.
And again, we're trying to come up with a consensus document. If we can't reach a consensus and there's a majority that feels a certain way, what we'll end up producing is a report that reflects a majority view and maybe a minority view as well.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not
it.
sure.
Yeah, can we have
But
that, the majority and minority?
I think it's part of this discussion and
Okay.
discussions in weeks ahead, but I feel compelled to try and move through this discussion. So in an effort to assist all of us, I've categorized, taking the resolution, which was our decision last week to look at the guidance in the resolution, all the bullet points there that created the formation of this group, and then just laying out, based on everything we've heard to date, where I think we are. And we do have a fundamental disagreement about sort of the role of the entity. And
Well,
so
then-
we need to resolve that.
I don't disagree. I don't think there's a disagreement in terms of the role of the entity. I think being a leader is different than leading. I think we just have to be careful, like, Preservation Maryland doesn't say like we lead and are in charge of all the local preservation groups, but we certainly try and play a leading role and support them and use all of our different resources and everything we've built up over nearly 90 years of existence to try and push the movement in a positive direction.
the only
So-
thing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, at least I don't. I mean, and I do hear the voices saying, like, I don't think that there are unmet needs in the community and those kinds of things. And I think that there is a fundamental disagreement on that. And I would even kind of quibble with, like, everything was fine before the 18th, let everything was back to normal. The health of Main Street, when you look at the business makeup and what's there and the rents that are being had and all those sorts of things and how sustainable it is in the long term in light of where retail is headed. So there are big, bold,
So I
scary
totally
things.
agree with that, and I
Yeah.
think that is the kind of focus that is, in my opinion, incredibly important for an organization.
Right.
And I will, and I completely apologize to the group for not being able to be here for the Unmet Needs Day. Of course there are unmet needs in this community. Number one, because we're a community. Every community has unmet needs. Two, because we've had some pretty catastrophic things happen. But I think words really, really matter. And I see things like adequate housing or whatever, and I don't even disagree with that, but I don't know what that means. And so in part that's my fault for not being around but I also get the sense like we're not following Robert's rules. We're sort of formally building consensus and whatever. If we really want to make a list of unmet needs, which I think is incredibly important, I'd like to do so in a way that really does define what we mean, probably bucketized, not 30 bullets, but maybe there are 4 or 5 or 10 or something that kind of capture the high level zeitgeist that then could have some explanatory statements. But everyone throwing out an opinion is extremely valid as a way to start a conversation, but I would argue it doesn't get us across the goal line to then build an organization to meet those unmet needs.
Okay, so the one question I do have here now is that, and I understand where you're coming from, Tom, and I understand where others of you are coming from, but when you look at the first 4 bullets, the one item that sticks out in my mind as one that suggests that this organization or that CDO will insert itself as the leader is the first statement, champion the needs and implement the vision of the district. But when you get to 2, 3, or 2 and 3, I guess because you're okay with 4 on that one, right? I don't see how 2 or 3 creates that impression.
Yeah, it's a given.
Yeah,
2 and 3.
I think 2 is fine. I think 3,
If you said coordinate in partnership,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
revitalization of the
Okay.
watershed, and that which complements the stormwater management recommendations in the EC water management plan, kind of gets at.
Right, I think so.
And really, that the coordination is going to be in partnership. That's not just wordsmithing. It's going to have to be. You're going to have to make sure that the work that you're doing on a building is of value to the business community, and the entree to the business community is ECP, and making sure that we're talking to the business community about, well, what's the makeup of Main Street? What do we want to have there? The CDO may be responsible for the bricks and mortar and pulling the funding together and making the space available and having a white box, but it's gonna, at the end of the day, you're gonna want to make sure it works for the business community. We don't have 9 more antique shops. Not that there's anything wrong with antique shops, but you want to have a balance and a mix of things, right? So I think all of this is going to be done in partnership and in coordination with. I think if you say it, it's less scary.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it probably is going to be anyway.
So we need to change number 1. I think if we change number 1 and make that a little adjustment to number 2, I think we have the basis for an acceptable.
Well, what I heard was on 2, is there any,
2 or 3?
let's talk about 2 first. Leave 1 alone for a second. Collaborate with all pertinent county agencies and state agencies, existing business organizations and committees. Is there any concern there with the way that's written?
I've got one question or comment on that. That is, would there be any need to coordinate at any point in time with federal agencies? And do we want to just say government agencies to leave the door open?
All pertinent government agencies.
Existing business organization.
Because this is public-private partnerships. You're going to be doing it whomever
Right.
the municipality or the
Right.
agency is.
I was trying not to write what we're doing.
All right. So existing business organizations, I think that covers the framework pretty well in community groups. Is anyone left out? Then the third bullet, coordinate, I like Nick's comment, in partnership. I think it's coordinate in partnership. I don't know how that would be worded.
We're going to
Coordinate
put in partnership
with
first.
Coordinated first.
It's the in partnership with existing organizations.
Existing organizations.
See, I think that's your number 1. It's a simple. Right?
Yeah.
And that ultimately is where I am. A lot of this is superfluous.
And then I
It's
would-
superfluous
Okay.
and derivative of number 4. Of course we're going to work with other organizations. Of course we're going to
People are going to
coordinate.
want to see that, though. I think it's helpful to say that you're going to do it, and just because of the what point you raised at the beginning, where it's like, were they going to do this on their own? Are they going to consider themselves the leader? If we make it very clear at the very outset in the preamble that we're doing all of this in partnership and we want to coordinate in partnership, perhaps that will allay some fears. There's going to be some there that until the proof is in the pudding, until they show themselves to be a good player. But if you say it up front,
Okay.
I don't think it hurts.
And there
What
might
is
be-
the third bullet? What does it actually mean? Because I think if it's just the second bullet, I think a new organization is going to walk in to coordinate, yes, in partnership, but to coordinate, why is government not coordinating? Or why, and again, I'm not saying, great, but EDA might be like, wait, you're going to coordinate what? Yes, we're all going to partner together, so why isn't that the second bullet, and what does the third bullet add?
The third bullet is the county doesn't have the experience to do redevelopment, period.
This is again just presuming the supremacy of this organization.
In this particular area.
I think in that area, though,
But
revitalization.
for the properties that it owns, for the properties that it acquires. Is this
That's not how,
organization?
but that's not how all CDOs work. If you look at the Southwest Baltimore Partnership,
Mhm.
they're not just assisting with revitalization of existing structures they own. They're also providing technical assistance to people who are doing work
Assistance
on
is
their own
different than
property.
coordinate. Assistance is different
Well, they're
than.
coordinating the assistance. Though.
They are coordinating.
No, but
assistance,
it's how serious
But
this
I
is,
hear
man.
coordinate, and I hear, hey, I don't like what you're doing. You didn't do this in coordination with us.
Oh.
We're in charge here. We're the neighborhood association for Ellicott City now. So.
Yes.
Good luck.
But-
That's the historic district commission as it is, and they don't
I
necessarily.
tend to look at it as more project-specific.
Mhm.
I see lots of projects,
Not to be-
opportunities in Ellicott City, as opposed to doing policy general, we should be
If they want
doing
to coordinate
this.
projects, I'd be okay with that too.
That's how I see it, it's project-oriented. The county doesn't have those skills. I look at the parking lots, I look at the courthouse.
Some would
I look
argue
at
that they
some
do.
of the flood.
Let's hope they do for the courthouse, because that's happening.
And smaller property owners, I think, would be excited perhaps about getting an organization that has some technical expertise to assist them, to give them more options.
And it's along the lines of-
Assist, I love assist, I'm on
So,
board with
so
that.
again, Tom, but my whole thing is, this organization is supposed to be made up of people, some of the people sitting around this table.
Yeah.
So who does this,
Wait.
I'm sorry, who does this right now? Number 3, who actually coordinates strategic reevaluation of the watershed area? Who does that now?
Howard County.
The county does.
Do they?
Howard County, between EDA, which is a quasi-governmental organization, and the Department of Planning and Zoning, they are, and DPW, I mean, implementing the.
Under the leadership of the county.
Well, they're
executive.
implementing the stormwater, but they're doing,
They
yeah.
do life and safety.
The question was about the third
Yeah, which says strategic revitalization.
Yeah, so no
of
one's
the
doing it.
watershed area and implement the stormwater. So
They're
if
two
the
separate
question
things.
is revitalization.
Yes.
And the watershed area, I mean, the only area of revitalization for which there's been focus is Main Street, Ellicott City. And I understand the arguments from those who believe we should expand that, although not Route 40. The coordination of the strategic revitalization of the area, again, it presumes some supremacy that I don't think is inherent in the CDC. I think that the assistance that you're describing is something that I think would be welcome. But I think saying that this organization, by virtue of the fact that it's going to own these buildings and is now in the position of managing the
public
commercial
building.
viability of Main Street, and after a while, I'm just going to stop because I don't want to be the obstacle. You all can proceed without me, but this is where I get off the bus. Because I've been down there working with these folks, and I can tell you this organization is not going to work if it presumes too big of a role for itself. I think that one thing, Nick, you and I agree on from the jump is we can take on, this entity can take on all the leadership in the world if it shows itself competent to do its basic function. And we can have down from that there are going to be other goals that it's going to look to accomplish, but the basic function needs to be done perfectly first before it can say, and now I am the maestro of Main Street,
So-
Ellicott City.
I really do want to know what your answer to this is, which is, what is the basic function?
I think
What would you say? What
Yeah.
would be your lead-in sentence for it?
So the basic function and what drew me here and made me interested in this entity would be to take ownership of buildings that, or I even like Angie's idea of the 100-year lease, but
Yeah.
I think that we can go either way on that. But take ownership of these buildings, management, their redevelopment, and in concert with the ongoing successful businesses, because let's not treat Ellicott City like it's a shanty town. I mean, there are ongoing successful businesses in Ellicott City, and to do that as if it were another business and property owner. So as it were another constituent of the larger Ellicott City area. And it can use any revenue that is derived from the successful redevelopment of those properties to revitalize the surrounding area. Like, I come back to very often, and I know it's not a CDC, but the Downtown Columbia Arts and Cultural Commission, because I think that function, the Downtown Columbia Arts and Cultural Commission, despite its name, is not going around Columbia saying, I'm going to coordinate what arts you put on. I'm going to decide what programming you're going to do. It's starting very small and giving grants and assisting other arts organizations and building its leadership that way. And so that is what I think the function would be, and I think that would work.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
So I agree with that.
yeah.
The one thing we don't have here is time.
Mhm.
And Angie Tursago brings that up pretty much every meeting. If you talk to anybody on Main Street, we don't have time. So to put an organization in place to wait and see how it performs, we're getting rid of a key component that is a major stressor to everybody on Main Street, which is time. And the only way to get this thing up and running is to put them in a leadership role with people from the
I don't-
community.
but to do
again,
what?
But
To do
we
a
here,
project.
but we here aren't going to elect the executive or the person running that. The person who will come in, the people who will come in will be you. It will be the head. It will be the head of all of these organizations, which will then form and come up with the makeup of the CDO or CDC. We're not doing that. We're giving them the toolkit to do that. Those people who are, whatever you would call them, the voices of the community, the people who are already in those grassroots organizations, they will then build up and bring in their own champion.
This is worth considering that this group was sort of created with that same constituency mindset. Representatives from the Chamber of Commerce, the Historic Preservation Community, the
Right.
Ellicott City Partnership, and so you know, I think where my only objection is leadership is earned, it's not asserted, and so you and I are on the same page. I just don't think you then get to say, and here is your leadership, go.
But see, we're not the ones saying, here's your leadership. We're saying, here's an organizational structure, bring in your leadership.
Well, and if it really is a, which I believe it is, if there really are unmet needs, and there really is a missing piece to revitalization in particular in Ellicott City, and a lot of that is part and parcel with the master plan, then by virtue of that, they are going to lead on those particular issues. And they're going to have to do it in partnership with others, but no one else is buying property. Well, there are private developers doing it, but no one else is taking on redevelopment projects of public buildings and public assets. So by virtue of that, they are going to end up leading on those issues. But I do agree that you just have to be careful with how you say leadership, I guess.
That opportunities of projects in Ellicott City are of a nature the private sector can't do them alone. The public sector can't do them alone. It requires a public-private partnership and an advocate for those projects. I agree with you. Yeah, there's a lot of other larger things you'd like addressed. If this comes into fruition, they've got to take on a project and do it in 9 months, or their credibility is gone. If nothing's happened in a year, it's toast. Yeah, you earn. And really, Ellicott City, somebody coming in and usurping, it wouldn't work. You know, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your caution and whatnot, and I think your suggestions are good. I think, to me, it's project oriented, and Ellicott City is just rich in those kinds of opportunities, but they require partnerships. Somebody that initiates, advocates for those partnerships, and helps guide that process. The county alone can't do it. The private sector alone can't do it. And so, yeah, I think, after 3, fine, whatever. I have, you speak about a board and whatnot, but I think the organization really requires a special skill set. And this is not a political appointment. This is somebody that you put an RFP out and get interest, select the right person. Everybody's got to work with that person, so it's a tough position, requires a very special skill set. But if that's the right person, yeah, things will happen. And it isn't usurping any. Who would want to take on the partnership? It would occupy 150% of your time, 200% of your time.
But
Nobody would take that on.
It should never be that.
Pardon?
It should never come to that.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
No.
know.
I mean, that's.
But,
And the
again,
other-
it's not a confrontational role. It's a
No.
role that, it's not an outside entity coming in and saying, here's your new leader. It's about the community going, okay, we know we
Can we
need
let
this.
up?
Who do we bring forward? Who can we elect?
You mentioned earlier the
This is
arts
all.
group. Maybe, I got this idea, I'm thinking, there's a need, and you go talk to whomever, this organization. Let me think about it. I might be able to pull something together. I might, let's talk more. It's that kind of, but they aren't gonna, that person's list is gonna be so full. They're not gonna be going out.
Are you on board with the revision of 1 and 2? I just want to understand that.
What, just get rid of it?
1 and 2, or do you think we
I
need to
mean,
eliminate
you almost
1?
could just get rid of one.
Yeah,
That's what I'd get rid of it, the 3 is one.
I've made sort of, my sentiments known, and I don't want to, Mike, I really do appreciate the work you put into this list, because I think that, the way I almost looked at this was like, everything down there is where my head was anyway.
So I'm
but-
taking pride in 4 through infinity here. So, if I got 8 items right out of 12 items in that list,
And I obviously
maybe
don't
the
get
better
to
way
decide
to
which
address
one.
this would be to say from the 4th bullet down, and we should talk about those bullets. And maybe the bullets that precede it are really what the mission statement is going to be for the entity. so that we don't really have a preamble in sort of the scope of work piece. The preamble to the scope of work to me is the mission statement, and maybe that's where the energy needs to be put in terms of having language that we know, consensus being.
Hopefully, we've hammered out what that mission statement's going to sound like. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's not going to start with the word.
Well,
we've batted around for a little bit here.
I think we can get rid of the last bullet.
Well, let's start with 4. Let's go through them. Who's ever phone that is, Gary? That's all right. It's happening, Gary, right now. There's somebody out there.
Don't do anything, I'll be right
Probably
behind you.
timeshare in Florida, you need to respond.
Deleting the first bullet.
Yeah.
We're killing the first one,
We
right?
are, I'm happy to say yes, let that go. Second bullet, we'll hold on to, and
So-
third bullet, there are elements of those bullets I think we're going to.
Well, we've edited the third.
So-
All right, so you have your edits. Everybody okay with those edits? So,
I dropped the record name, but I'm like with Tom. At some point, clearly, it's just not pleasant to hear me talk. So.
I'm just wondering whether the word catalyst comes into play in that. It doesn't necessarily, I'm just thinking in terms of the discussion we're having about leadership versus coordinate versus whatever, in terms of like asserting it.
Catalyze,
Playing a catalytic role.
catalyze, advocate, you know,
Support.
or assist.
So one of my fears for whatever organization this comes up with is putting together something that is not empowered. It's not necessarily that it has to be the final say, but if it's not empowered, and I can't remember who it was several weeks ago, said, what's the point of putting another organization together that doesn't have any real, for lack of a better word, teeth?
So I took some instruction from what Nick said, and sort of the words that we put down is not the power that we give this organization. It's rather explanatory words. So
Yeah.
when this is for the sake of communicating to the community what the intention is here and how they're going to function. So I don't think anything that we do here is necessarily empowerment. I think how the organization functions is its empowerment. You know, if it goes out and it succeeds in, as Gary said, identifying a project, getting it done in 9 months. If it is able to do those type of tasks, the organization is going to develop its own leadership and it will do it quickly. I think that, and why I'm sort of backing away from saying, well, you use this word instead of that word, is outside of overstepping our bounds, this doesn't really matter. If we overstep our bounds, we spend our credibility before we're even out the door. So that's sort of what I'm concerned of, because, you know, not that any of us should be on social media, but if you look at the comments on the videos that are being recorded here today, there are some people that have some very significant concerns about what this organization is going to do. And we don't want to burn that credibility beforehand. So what you said is very instructive to me. Let's make sure that if we're saying we're going to do something, we can describe our methodology, so long as we are aware of the fact that our methodology should not be presumptive. We should not be presumed to have anything we don't already have.
But there are also people who are tracking this on social media who support very much the broader sort of mission as well.
Certainly, yeah.
So there are both sides, Tom. I just want to be fair to anybody who may be watching or listening later, that there are many opinions about how it should be. And there were no boundaries set. Reading the resolution over again and again on us in terms of saying what this should do or shouldn't do. It really was an open book. The county executive has taken, looking for us to give him guidance and the other members of the council guidance ultimately. So at the end of the day, this is a recommendation, I think. And it is something that they will decide ultimately what the form and shape of the entity should be. But I do think our duty, our responsibility is to opine on that. And if feasible, to be, as a group, speaking with a voice if it's possible. I want to bring you with, I want to bring Matt with, I want to bring everybody here around the table with, all of us in this discussion. So we're on a bullet up here. Matt made the point a moment ago about coordination, I think. usually.
Yeah, I would just say support. Something said in there.
Explore.
Explore the strategic revitalization. I feel like support is a little stronger than explore.
Yeah. It just
Or you
identifies
could
the
also say-
allegiance to the master plan.
Yeah, or you could say help to implement the strategic revitalization.
Okay.
Is help, what about help to implement?
Or implement key aspects.
Will help to implement this.
I mean, that's basically support.
Pretty generic.
I agree with Nick, help to implement this.
Help them implementation. Okay. All right, and then the next bullet, in the vaunted eight, here, first up, form as a nonprofit 501c3, negotiate, sell, purchase, public and private property, accept ownership of property, or plan, solicit bids, yada, yada, yada. I think they need the flexibility to sell, purchase, lease. I didn't put that in there, but I don't think it should necessarily mean buying or selling. It could be leasing, it could be ground leasing.
Lease should be in there.
Yeah, so I just want to add that. Lease, and then there's a form, and I think lease is broadly construed enough that it would include ground leases, but ground leases are probably going to be the vehicle through which things happen.
And the articles of incorporation are going to be much more expansive than that, and they will go on for paragraphs about all the things that they're empowered to
They
do.
would list every entity, every possible real estate transaction.
Yeah. So this gives everybody a good idea that it's fair game, but the
Yes.
legal text is going to be.
Should we recommend that whoever takes on this role would help create that language?
What, for the articles of incorporation?
Yeah.
I think you would just say draft and implement, or draft and execute articles of incorporation somewhere here. Just like you would say, form as a nonprofit 501c3. I mean, the same thing as saying you want to have bylaws.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of pro forma. But it probably should be in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's kind of given to you.
It is. I mean, if you're a corporation, you have to
You
have.
have to have them.
articles,
Right.
so-
Rules of engagement, so.
Yeah.
Any other changes to
You bet.
that?
So I just have a question. I'm totally in, like, this one down. I think it's a nice defined mission, all that, so I'm not going to beat that dead horse. But I do have an honest question. There's we've discussed how, I mean, Nick has said and others have said, like, so it's not a single large property holder, it's this CDC that would sort of help maybe have a more diverse long-term strategic business mix and so on, and I'm all about all that. What I don't understand, and maybe we need, this would be a question for the CDC type, Odette or others, but is the CDC empowered somehow to make these decisions absent county guidance or legal oversight? Like, it's really, to me, it's a really interesting thing that, we like market-based solutions generally in the country, and this is a little bit more of the, and I'm cool with it, but it's a little bit more of the hand of a, sort of like a not-for-profit mall owner making certain decisions. I'm cool with it, but I wonder, are there legal issues, and Tom, you're the lawyer, that frankly need to be overcome at the county level, or who gets to decide? Is it the board of this organization? I don't want us to wordsmith the actual articles of incorporation, the charter and all that, but like, does the board decide?
It would depend on how the board was. I think I know what you're getting at. It would depend on how the board is elected. So is it a self-electing board? Is there a membership of it? Does the county have appointment to it? The county's legal authority, and any municipality's legal authority over a CDC generally is either through board appointment, so they have a vote, or through strings they attach to funding. So they can say, we don't want to see you do blank
X
with
percentage
this.
of the,
And so that's normally how they exert authority over this. But you're right. I mean, to some extent, it is sort of it's an in-between. It's a hybrid of the market model.
And there's an additional string that I would anticipate in something like this, which is the manner of conveyance of properties that the county owns to the CDC. That
There would be
maybe reverters and deeds and things like that that would say, if you want to turn this into such and such, it reverts back.
And it may even convey with easements too.
Well, and to address that, you've got the overlying county regulations of its own incorporation and also the planning and zoning that's already established on those pieces of property doesn't just magically disappear. Those still all have to be in complete compliance. So I think that that's kind of already taken care of by that role. It's just a coordination of saying, okay, we've got a public-private partnership that wants to do this. Does that then incorporate, and that's when you step in and bring in your county partner from planning and say, does this meet with the rules and regulations?
I also go back to the board itself, which would be county appointments. There would be at least 1 or 2 county appointments on the board as members of the board. Not only does the county play a role in selecting who sits on the board, but they would actually be representatives from the county voting members on the board. So there'd be a tie-in, I think.
So the Arts and Culture Commission have that we talked about? Were they a creation of the county?
They were a creation of the county, and then they finally sort of got started upon the conveyance of Meriwether Post Pavilion.
But do they have like a county appointee on their board?
No.
They don't? Okay, interesting.
Well, that begs another question too. Is this going to be a strong director with the board? Or is this going to be a strong board with a director? And I believe this needs to be a strong director with the board. The most successful clients that I had in this forum, they were very focused on what they did, and they had a board, but generally they were responsible to the executive. That was it. That gave them the freedom to function. Now, in this arena, think about it. Nobody's going to be able to function without everybody being aware.
I don't know if I want to get down into the weeds that far to say what level of authority a board that hasn't been formed yet and
With no
executive
bylaws.
and legislative body that haven't been apprised of our recommendation. I don't know if
Could it be an issue?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I took a Sarah, my bad.
Pardon?
I took a Sarah a little bit, my bad. I would just wonder if there's any sort of, there are kind of boundaries, left and right limits, frankly, on the organization itself and its authorities that we should be really
Well,
keen to
just
focus on.
there's
look at how we're
self-defining.
making a decision here. How's that going to function, with, doing projects and implementing and whatnot?
I hear you. It's an issue. I don't know if we want to get to that level of discussion in this, because I think we really get bogged down. How powerful should this person be?
And to a certain extent, we got to put the boat in the water and push it off.
Yeah, I think that's the next
Good point.
step beyond us. We're making a recommendation. We found that there are needs, and I think we've all agreed. There's a consensus about that over the last couple of weeks, and I think our job is to address the broad outline of what this can be and make our suggestions as a recommendation, and let the process that unfolds after this play out, where issues like that can be discussed, I think. But do people disagree with that? I don't know. Okay, so I think we're okay with 4. Coordinate with all 5. Coordinate with all county public works, transportation, and planning initiatives in the area. Again, it's kind of a bland statement, but again, it's a coordination role. The board of directors composed of members representing departments, agencies, maybe government. Maybe we should be a little broader. I don't know there'd be any federal interest. So I kind of limit, I don't know there'd be any state interest, frankly, but I just want to open the tent here as widely as I can. Community reps and existing business organizations, have they left anybody out? Bullet number 6.
Property owners.
Okay. Got it. Anyone else?
I think community representatives is there, but the residents in Ellicott City always seem to get sort of overlooked, so we want to make sure.
That's what I meant by that. That
Yeah,
doesn't mean that to you, Tom?
Well, so community representatives, that could be Dave Carney at the wine bin, or it could be Beth Woodruff, who's a resident up the hill. So, there's the business community and residential community.
Do you want to get to the point of
This is-
I'm thinking of when the state creates a commission, they'll say one member of a representative of,
Mhm.
the business community, a representative of the blank. Because this is it might be worthwhile to flesh that out a little bit so that when they actually create the board, they're they understand immediately who it is they're supposed to go after. So you don't end up with a situation like that. Right?
Yeah, I
Well, look,
get
we
it.
got somebody from Ellicott City.
Right, I'm more, so long as it says residents, I'm good, because
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
want,
So do-
the county executive should have a little discretion from a policy perspective when they approach this.
Instead of just saying community representative, do you want to say business and residential representatives?
Yeah, I think
And
that's
then
just
you-
already there, so just residents, yeah.
Residents.
Do you want to have anyone with any expertise in any areas?
Yeah.
Because you're not catching any expertise there. So you're not like trying to appoint anyone with property redevelopment expertise, historic preservation expertise, which may be of value in
Yeah,
HDC.
I actually tackled that on the structure staffing piece, which we're not on right now, we may not get to it tonight, I doubt we will. But first sub-bullet there, experienced economic development business community leaders. So people who have a
So it's
background.
kind of, but that's
in
under,
that.
that's for the board.
That's for the board.
Okay.
But, you know, and that's what we're addressing here. So I didn't, in the activities, I didn't go into a lot of the board issues here, because there's a whole separate section
Okay,
of the
that's
board.
fine. then. That's fine.
So we might pick it up there, but I want to go to back to Matt's point, property owners, I think it's a good pickup. Residents, Tom, good pickup, and I'd like to throw business owners in there, because I see three sort of constituencies in the area, you know, property owners,
Yeah,
business owners, residents.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't,
I read
you
it
may
too,
be,
yes.
maybe a property owner, but you may not be a person who's renting the building, you know, running the business, and the business has been there,
Tenant.
you know, for a long time.
Yeah.
Right, so I just don't want to exclude anybody. And this paragraph, this bullet is not meant to address everything about the board. That will come later.
Okay.
Okay. And here's just a wonderful glory moment here. The economically self-sustaining. I mean,
Every nonprofit wants that.
But
Yeah.
after how long?
Pardon?
But after how long? 2 years, 5 years?
I think
I
it's
don't
always
know.
a while.
I'll get into that in the next a couple sections later.
Almost 90 years old. We're still working on it. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
and you may never be, so I don't want to invalidate
Yeah.
the group because they couldn't achieve economic self-sufficiency within a time defined. And it might be that government supports this, and other entities have to support it for a while to get it off its feet. I do suggest that in the funding section later. But I just thought globally, that's kind of a good mission. I think we would all like it to see some be self-sustaining. Bring creative financing solutions, managerial oversight, the infrastructure, building preservation, and historic district revitalization challenges confronting Ellicott City, and I should say the watershed there. So please, you can make that change. Watershed area. Okay, any comment there? All right, create and implement public-private partnerships, P3s. Exploring the county, opportunities with Baltimore County, explore commercial area along the Patapsco and Frederick Road areas. And I just think it's, explore, it seems to be a pretty vague enough
Good.
word. That we're not directing them to, it's just great, they should be cognizant of things going on across the river, and whether there are opportunities to partnership and with them. And I took the last bullet right out of sort of the resolution, be an ombudsman for Ellicott City. There's a suggestion about an ombudsman role in the thing, and I want to talk about that for a minute, because I'm a little conflicted with an ombudsman, CDC, all these other organizations. I wasn't sure how that ombudsman thought played out, and if anyone's really thought about it here among us. But I believe there was language in the resolution.
This doesn't refer, by the way, to Tony Summers' role, does it? Yeah, there is actually a new ombudsman person,
Right, so how does that work?
which was, and wasn't he introduced at the same time? So I wonder if, is that just a holdover of the executive order?
Shane, do you have any insight on that, on the ombudsman?
I don't remember they're saying anything about an ombudsman in the executive order, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's right here, creating an ombudsman position to work directly with businesses on Main Street.
Transit.
Possibly.
that seems like it's already been. isn't
This
that-
says, whereas some key elements of the plan include, this is talking about what the county executive's plan was.
So that included creating an ombudsman position.
Right, but this is just saying what the county executive announced.
So
This
there's a
is
safe
just
and
the
sound plan,
preamble, yeah.
and we're a part of that
So,
plan,
yeah.
as is the ombudsman.
So,
I feel like we
I would
should-
strike that.
But you
Yeah.
look into
just strike it. So Tom, I'm sorry, but one of the things you endorsed has just gone away.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll have to write a minority report.
That one, please. Look,
Don't still do it.
let's just do a little time check. I have 8:15-ish. So I think the most challenging part of this is the mission statement to me. And maybe we can now, Tom, if you don't mind, going back to the language that we sent around.
Yeah,
And think about it in the context of some of the bullets that we just agreed to. And everyone has a copy, I believe. let's just take a look at it. So Tom, maybe I could give you the floor.
Yeah,
Walk us through
and
this.
so I don't know if I would recommend this to be in the mission statement, but essentially what I'm advocating for here is a approach to the existing ecosystem in Ellicott City. I already know from our previous discussion that this proposal will be more controversial than I had intended. But at the last meeting, we had talked about how this organization will be the new kid in town, and that there are existing organizations that have existing missions, and these are valid missions. These are not mission creep on their behalf. It's just where they're situated. And bringing this new organization in, it is inevitable that there will be some friction amongst them. And that's not to say the CDC may not be, in many of those circumstances, the best entity to undertake whatever those roles or responsibilities may be. I was just suggesting a manner in which there may be some deference to those existing organizations, and I would welcome a friendly amendment as it may relate to undertaking partnerships with those organizations. So that was the thrust of this. And with that, I'll open myself up.
What if we took bullet 4 and somehow turned that into a mission?
I concur.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Absolutely. That's the mission.
Yeah, okay.
Probably just pull it up 5,000 feet or something, so you don't have to say lease, sell, some higher.
So,
It doesn't, yeah, but that, I would
I don't
be-
think it's complete.
It's
but-
not complete, I mean, you're missing some of the, I mean, like the good facade work that you guys do via DHCD, right? Or the automation, so I know ECB has done. You know, some of that could be done in the West End in residential areas, but that's outside of your catchment, you're not gonna do it there. But that
It's actually most of it's in their catchment anyway.
It is.
is all of it in the catchment.
Oh, yeah, it's the watershed.
Most of it, yeah.
I think we caught it now.
Goes to.
No, in ECP,
I'm saying
yeah, yeah.
ECPs.
Yeah,
Oh,
it is
Oh,
actually.
ECPs. But I'm just saying that there are like facade programs or things like that would not fall under what you're describing here. Particularly the technical assistance piece is not
Yeah.
there. And that can be an important component, particularly as you stand up an organization that doesn't have a lot of resources beyond its awareness and ability to assist.
It could potentially be an oversee projects.
What
So
about
just
a good
to-
catch-all, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
A catch-all statement is what I'm saying, suggesting to catch or cover all those things that, because
Yeah.
there could be a lot of small things that we might have an intent to do.
Mhm.
Won't be-
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe just spitballing here, and just looking at the third preambular paragraph of the resolution that created this body, where it talks about CDCs being nonprofits that are created to support and revitalize communities. What if we took that fourth bullet and said something along the lines of, creating a 501c3 to support and revitalize the Ellicott City community through such measures, inter alia, and then have these things.
Yeah.
Would you feel comfortable with introducing the concept of the Ellicott City Watershed Master Plan
However we want to define it.
as it
yeah.
exists?
Right,
And-
but I'm just thinking in terms of trying to marry the concept, because I think the concept of revitalization is important to have. If we're going to have a mission statement, and it's about revitalizing,
Right.
that somehow has to enter into
But
it.
tag it to the master plan. Interesting.
I think Tom's statement here would be a good additional bullet point,
like a
somewhere
policy
to
statement.
add in here. I'm just not sure. I feel like the first sentence makes a lot of sense and is very clear. I feel like the second sentence gets a little squishy because you talk about may potentially infringe.
And I'm
So-
fine with the first sentence being, especially since we're at a 10,000-foot level.
Yeah.
And the second sentence is more of an implementation, and
Right.
I don't think that we want to
Right.
get into implementation.
But I think it should be very clear that we want it to be like what you say in the first sentence.
So, in reading this, I think we're thinking in the same thing, which is you don't want to duplicate and step on toes of existing organizations, which what we should do is instead of saying avoids duplication, it says incorporates existing entities doing the job.
That
would
sounds like
not-
empire
No,
building,
I'd partner with or something.
When I say,
of absorbing or something.
no, no, no.
Because I just imagine the blob like coming down and.
No, 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 no.
Consolidate.
Not, I didn't say consolidate. That's,
consolidate.
when I say incorporate, that's not the right word then.
Coordinate
Because
with
So what
no, it's not coordinates, it's include, as in ECP would be a member of that. In writing, so that it's not, maybe they would be, maybe they would. Because as soon as you say ECP is included in that, everything that ECP is already doing comes along.
But that's not necessarily true because Matt has been at all of our meetings, and I don't know if the ECP would necessarily believe that everything that we've done. Now, Mike's done a great job running our meetings, but I think that representation does not automatically mean incorporation. It does not automatically mean that you have the buy-in of the organization, which is why this was very important to me to have, particularly the first sentence here, because it all goes to, I want to see this organization succeed, and credibility is so important to me.
I think there may be, to that point, I think there may be instances where something like that happens. You know, like I'm probably not going to be on this either, but the CDC goes out to revitalize, some of the historic structures that have just been purchased. And maybe they apply into ECP for facade improvement grants and they match that with a certain amount of dollars. And so in that sense, their role has been incorporated into this project. They're helping it move forward. And everybody's happy, they're all playing their roles. But I don't think you can say that you automatically incorporate the work of ECP.
And I would say that, Charles, what you were saying,
it's case by case.
I think what you're concerned about is incorporated into this sentence, because all this says is it avoids duplication of efforts. It doesn't exclude incorporation. It doesn't exclude instances in which the CDC
My
would say.
wordsmithing is clearly not adequate for this moment, because what I'm trying to convey is not what you guys are hearing. ECP, Economic Development Partnership, already has their defined roles. I don't think that the CDC needs to come forth and bring in its own Economic Development Corporation or try to form a new partnership, as in duplication of effort. I think by including those organizations as a board member, as a voice, and saying these are people who must be included, you have now gotten rid of the possibility of duplication of effort because they're already there at the table.
And that's why I'm saying that this sentence is not exclusive of what you're saying.
Yeah, right.
This sentence can coexist with what you're saying.
Right.
It's just sort of saying at the front end, hey, by the way, don't reinvent all the dozens of wheels that are in Ellicott.
So we agree on the first sentence. How do we include Nick's comment about the technical assistance role this entity can play?
I actually think Tom he may have hit on it where you say oversee projects. That's pretty broad. That's pretty broad.
And I really
That's
liked
fine.
what Tim had to say in terms of the third preamble paragraph for the executive order for an 501c3
To lead
nonprofit organization created to support and revitalize, and then insert the geographical scope. Gary, I would disagree with you, but obviously I'm just one voice on explicitly referencing the master plan in the mission statement, but that's just me. I think that, I think that it would narrow the scope of the organization.
How so?
Because just like in the Federalist Papers, they didn't want to list the Bill of Rights because then it presumed that those were the only rights you had. By listing the master plan, you are narrowing the scope to the master plan, number one. And number two, I firmly believe that the implementation of the master plan is the responsibility of the government. I mean, it's just my work in land use and
They
zoning
have
that makes me say
responsibility
that.
of oversight, but the implementation, they don't have the skills to do it.
No, every individual citizen, property owner, and developer implements the master plan by way of the governance of government, by way of the Department of Planning
Say
and
what?
Zoning. Everyone, we all implement the master plan.
Gary, I own property, I own a house in the historic district. I'm part of the master plan. I mean,
Mhm.
guidance, when I look to see what I can do with my property, I look at the master plan. Tom's point is valid. I mean, it is something that, it's not just the institution that we're creating here that's implementing plan. We're all a party to it. You're a party to it. Your house, anybody owns a house.
Okay, let me go back. The master plan identifies project opportunities. Who's going to do it?
Anyone, it could be the CDC, or it could be that property owner that.
It requires partnerships. Who's going to take the initiative?
There could be market forces that motivate that
And
implementation.
if there are not
as much
market
as-
forces-
Should I just let you talk, Gary, or do you want to hear me answer?
No, you're saying the same thing.
I think Tom's addressing the point, Gary, because if market forces aren't addressing a need in the district, and that's where this entity is really being formed to address, then they're going to step up. But if in fact the building is not in distress and ownership has the capital to make improvements, they'll step up. And they don't need the CDC to play a role at all in what they're doing. And the vision for what happens in downtown Ellicott City is driven by the master plan, ultimately. That's always the guiding instrument. It's not just this any jurisdiction in the state of Maryland, it's done this way. So I do think there's some reflection here we have to make on the fact that it's not just one entity that's going to implement this, because we're all a party to implementation. Anybody who owns real estate in the district is a party to its implementation.
So, owning a piece of property in the historic district and being part of our grand master plan, the one thing that I notice is that if I come up with my garage of my property, the county doesn't look at me in the total aggregate of the watershed. It looks at it in the aggregate of the immediate surrounding houses around me. It's very siloed. Whereas I think this organization that we're coming up with needs to be that overarching group that says, well, yes, that's great for that piece of property, but what is the effect of that going to have on this piece of property down here, on these businesses, on these residents down here?
I have two questions to that. One, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you suggesting that this will have, I'm hearing government legal authorities to suggest that your historic, what you propose to do with your facade is not sufficient, or who you're going to rent to doesn't accord with your whatever the CDC wants? Maybe I don't understand what you're saying.
Those are already, again, there's already rules and procedures in place for what can and cannot be done on individual parcels. So then the watershed master plan, one of the things that it has in it is, again, for the entire watershed. Currently, if a developer comes in and says, I want to buy lot F, and the county says, okay, we'll do a trade with you, they are allowed to do whatever they want on lot F with regards to how it's currently zoned. And as long as they meet that letter of the law, then, for lack of a better term, the county has got handcuffs on them, say, go ahead.
So a master plan is a policy document that is meant to inform both zoning decisions and legislative decisions.
Right.
I think that the master plan is going to govern this CDC as much as it governs you as a property owner.
Right.
It is not that the CDC is above and the master plan is here and then everybody else is in between. The master plan is above everything.
Or that the CDC would have super rights to decision. I don't know. So explain what you're saying. You're talking about your garage, and the county approves that, yes or no, whatever. But what do you mean the sort of more collective ecosystem? What sort of power should the CDC possess in this regard?
So Nick brought up the idea, or not the idea, the concept of, do we have enough antique shops? Do we have enough XYZs? And part of that master plan, our master plan doesn't establish that. Our master plan says this is what we want the physical to look like, but not necessarily where even you step in, which is the economic development and also the partnership, saying, look, it would be really great if we could pull somebody from this area of business into our community to help expand it out. That's where your organization makes a lot of sense to have that input into a CDO or a CDC and helping implement the master plan by bringing that to part of it. Because the government organization is just like the physical. If you want to open up 6 Italian restaurants on Main Street and you meet the letter of the law, you get to open up 6
So I
restaurants.
do have to disagree with you a little bit, because the master plan, again, is a policy document. To the extent that there are any decisions that go before the hearing examiner, the Historic District Commission, the zoning board, anything, I agree with you that if they are doing anything by right, they can proceed by right. But the purpose of a master plan is to inform those decisions, and it is brought into play in terms of how recommendations are made and how decisions are made by those administrative bodies.
So, Tom, fair to just try to cut through. We are at the 8:30 mark. I just want to let everybody know we don't have a clock in the room tonight, and I don't want to take more time. But if it were to assist in the implementation of the master plan, not be the implementer, I'm trying to find a path here.
Yeah, I don't think it can. I mean, I think that,
But
you know,
assist
we're
in
presuming
respect-
the benevolent.
Let me clarify the
benevolence
word.
of
So if
organization.
it were assist with respect to the properties it has a role in,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just like anybody else does, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Particularly if it's going to own property or it's
it
gonna
develops
develop
its properties in accordance with the master plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be what you said though, Charles.
Yeah,
You
but I
seem
would
to be
just-
thinking.
I'm just trying
a little
to,
bigger.
maybe consider
No.
Frederick and the waterfront. It's a large piece of real estate, and public partner and private partnerships were created for a lot of those projects. They wouldn't have happened on their own. And yet, when those partnerships occur, everybody wins. It's win-win. 1 on 1 equals 3. You know, and if it isn't, the partners would, I'm not going to get involved in that. It's those kinds of contextual, and the county is not geared to do that kind of consideration, just from a real estate standpoint, let alone from...
That is your opinion. You keep stating it as if it's certain.
It's my opinion, and it's from 40 years of living in this place and watching it
Certainly,
happen.
but we better hope that master plan serves some function, because we're operating under a general master plan, and that is
That
how
is
our zoning.
entirely different.
But that is how our zoning is determined. I'm
No,
just
this is
saying the
not
master
zoning.
plan is going to exist regardless of whether or not the CDC exists. I think that where we might find consensus is saying that the projects and the properties that the CDC undertakes shall be done in accordance with the master plan. Although I'll say that those words are superfluous, because of course they will. And
That's how it
so,
works.
but if that's what we need to say to get to some area of consensus, I'm fine with it. I just
Fine
think
with
it's extra words.
right. So if we're taking a project focus, Gary, and I think you articulated this tonight, that this entity would have, it would seem to me that whatever it does is consistent with the master plan, be it the watershed master plan or any other plan that supplants it over time. There will be evolutionary changes in thought in zoning over time. So it's not just about the Ellicott City watershed master plan, because something else will come along and will take its place. And the properties to which this entity is responsible for will have to comply with that. It's not meant to be, I don't think there's any consensus here that it becomes the entity that implements the master plan on a broad basis, because it doesn't have control over all the real estate in
Charles
Ellicott
property.
City.
Well,
Right.
I'm
And
just using
and I
my
want to be clear, I
garden
don't think
example, but-
anyone's really articulated that's what this thing is supposed to do. It's supposed to dictate to any property owner the rules of engagement. That is county function.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm saying that to the physical nature of it is absolutely county function, and those are already all legislated. They're in place. Every 10 years they're re-established. That's without question. I guess the bigger thing here for me is it's when you look at the impact on the sense of community residential wise. Again, anybody who can come in and say, I own this piece of property, and as my own little boundaries put it, I am dictated by R14, and this is the zoning, and I can do whatever I want in there. But there's not, unless I'm missing the boat on this, there doesn't seem to be any way to step back and say, that's great, you are allowed by law to put that there, however, it is going to have a negative impact on the 35 residents who are surrounding you. Or it's going to have a negative impact on the community as a whole. And that's where I think that the public-private partnership and the not oversight, but
See,
the
that's where-
engagement. Yes, that's where we get squishy. That's where we get squishy. The engagement of the CDC is able to say, you know what, you do want to develop your property, we do want to build something here, but it might be more beneficial to the surrounding area and to the entire broad picture of the master plan if that looks a little more like this than what you're proposing. Right now, even with master plan, that doesn't happen. I can put what I want to put here as long as I meet the letter of the zoning.
Would you still be
So
able to
you're-
do it?
Still what, Tom? Sorry, say that.
You would still be able to, you would still have the rights to do it. It's like, I go back to my property law class.
Yeah.
Property rights is a bundle of sticks.
Right. Well, and the hard part about that, though, and this is something that I speak from firsthand, is that sometimes your ability to maintain your bundle of sticks and your property law has a negative impact on my property. And I should have the same legal standing that says, well, wait a second, I bought into this as well, and this is my bundle of sticks. So I guess it's like the
So-
smoker, anti-smoker.
I hear you talking about important issues, absolutely, but I don't see those in any way as the province of the CDC. I see those as like maybe time to lobby for some slight changes to state and or county legislation.
Right.
And I'm not meaning to dismiss that. I know what you mean, the importance of viewing a system as a system, not just as isolated elements of a system. But I don't think that is anywhere near the role of the CDC. I think under whose legal authority, frankly, nobody's,
Or-
would we be able to pull that off.
Are you thinking like creating a culture within business owners?
No. I think Matt said it on the head, is that I think what I was looking for when you say, we're niggling the words about what the CDC will be, whether it's a coordinator, whether it's overseeing, whether it's implementing, we're niggling on a word. And that word, for all of us, is very important because it's going to include what happens to our community. And, that's why that word's important to me.
Can I just call a timeout for a second? It's almost 8:45, and I'd like to suggest we have made some progress tonight in terms of the write-up. Maybe we could recirculate that and meet again in a week.
So just a reminder, we don't currently have a meeting scheduled for next week.
We don't.
Because
Are you
I'm
looking
not,
next week?
well, I'm not away, I'm staffing the county executive.
Ah.
So if you want me to schedule a meeting for next week and try and find you someone else to staff, I can do that, but right now we don't have it.
I like the consistency of your role, Shannon. I don't think we've all enjoyed your company. And it would be great if we could find a night next week that might work other than the night we're conflicted, if that's feasible. It's
I don't
not
have any
feasible.
other nights
Can
because I have
can
other
a
meetings.
staff person
all
to a
week.
county council person assist us?
Yeah, that's what I said, I can try and find you another staffer.
There's one sitting in the room with
Yeah.
us.
She's like, no.
Is that, I mean, it's crazy.
No.
I mean, I can talk to Nicole offline. Unfortunately, I just don't have there's no other days next week that I'm not
Or
doing
if
work
there's someone
things.
from BPZ that could sit in and continue the function of just sort of reflecting in this format the things we agree on, so we actually make some progress. I really want to keep pushing this discussion forward as best we can.
Yeah, I can try and locate a staffer for next week.
Yeah.
In the room.
Like someone's running out of the
Very quickly. So I don't mean to stop this abruptly. I think it's been a very fruitful discussion tonight, spirited moments, and I appreciate that. So let's just keep working on this. We'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And the letter that Dr. Boyle included the operating questions we have.
Yeah.